Hello, welcome to the Naked Podcaster. Today, I would like to welcome Laura Staley. Laura, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
And your website is called cherishyourworld.com. And I want to jump in and really talk. It's very clean and clear, but I really want to talk about what that means to you and everything that entails. So jump in.
Okay. For me, Cherish Your World is cherishing your heart, your inner world, and your outer physical space. So I trained and certified with the Western School of Feng Shui. I got excited about that after a finished basement flooded, and I had this met with a relative at the time who showed me a book, and I opened it up and it said, because she was all excited, Feng Shui, Feng Chop Sui, what is this, right? And I opened the book and it said, live with belongings that you love. And I was like, what? It's stuff. And, but I was intrigued and I sucked down the whole book. I found it fascinating. She said, just take it, I'll get another copy. I walked back into my house, the first floor, and I look around and I see hand-me-downs that I loathe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, whoa. And then I looked at my life and I thought, oh my God, do I have a hand-me-down life? Like, who am I? And it was that awakening to this permission to live with belongings that I loved, that I found my voice, I found my heart, I found a passion for a lifetime, and in a way to serve other people. And about 4 years later, I trained and certified with the Western School of Feng Shui. And I love asking people questions about the quality of their life, and then about what's happening in their physical spaces. I think my favorite clients have been homeowners or apartment dwellers or condo dwellers, right? So I'm in there in that sacred space and asking those questions of, tell me about the picture, tell me about these belongings, and tell me about what's happening in your life. And often, Jen, I'm just giving people permission because I'm listening deeply to how they're answering those questions. And they're saying, oh my gosh, that picture on the wall, I cannot stand it. I have had it up for 10 years and it gives me the creeps and And then they tell me the whole story and I'm like, oh, permission, right? I'm like this magic wand lady and just giving people permission to take the picture down. It's okay. Find a family member who loves it. Find somebody who actually resonates with that picture. You deserve to have belongings in your space that support you, that nourish you, that inspire you. And then, and then look at your life. I mean, are you in relationships that are nurturing and supportive and high quality and self-aware and growing and evolving? Or are they dragging you down or making you sick, or, you're making yourself sick, or, right? Or the activities that are soul sucking. And what's happening in your inner world, right? Have you resolved all the grief in your heart? Because I will tell you time and time again, I walk into people's spaces and it's a metaphor for what's happening here inside of them and in their lives. So, and like the shame, the embarrassment, like I hold so much compassion, right? Because I got my stories of my own journey to this world of Feng Shui, of making that connection that everything is connected, and can I empower those connections? So can I support this person in empowering their connections to their belongings and let go of the clutter? All the different forms of clutter, the unloved ones, the artifacts of unfinished business, the wandering nomads, the just too much that's choking them, right? That just, they can't even walk in the room, the junk room, right? They open the door and things start, literally falling or a closet, right? And the boxes start tumbling out of the closet and they're like, you're going to shove, or the cabinets in the kitchen, right? And a lot of times we're hiding our grief, we're hiding our pain, we're hiding whatever is unresolved in our physical space, and we're hiding it somewhere in our bodies. And so the permission to do both but start where you can start, right? If it's one drawer, if it's one belonging, oh my gosh, right? And then there are these treasures. I mean, I remember talking to this gentleman who had traveled, and he'd get these treasures and he'd put them in the bathroom that he never used. And I looked at him and I said, okay, I got it. And what treasure inside of you are you hiding from the world that the world would just adore and cherish? And he was like, how'd you know? And it's just like he found out, right, by that deeper question. Yes, do I have ideas about placement and arrangement? Absolutely. There's this deep 3,000-year-old wisdom. But more important to me are a client or a workshop participant's, their tastes, their preferences. What do you love? So like I'm looking at the backdrop of here, I'm thinking, okay, reds and blacks and the flowers, and I'm like, just intuitively, or I'll even notice what somebody's wearing and I'll be like, they're in blue or they're in black, or, because the different colors represent the elements, that are out in nature. So it's all about nature. Ultimately, Feng Shui comes from our relationship to the natural world. So water, the trees, the sunshine, all of those things. And can we bring those into our physical spaces that we've created to create harmony, to create safety, comfort, and flow and balance? And then begin to find that dynamic equilibrium, right? Because like right now, my table isn't impeccable here in my office. I mean, to some people it would look impeccable, right? But to me, I'm like, okay, everything's not cleared off. But to find that sweet spot for you, where your space inspires you. You want to be in your office doing what you love. You want to be in the kitchen cooking a meal for your family. You want to be in the living room connecting with people and laughing and telling hilarious stories and eating delicious food, right? Or having people bring their potluck and it's about enjoying life. It's about savoring the preciousness of this life. And it's not a one and done. It's not like, oh, okay, you clear all the clutter and now it doesn't somehow sneak back into your space, right? The stuff still comes in the mail. Some people have spouses who are still clicking the, whatever, the internet, and boxes keep arriving and they're like, why do we need this? And I'm trying to clear, and, So I know that physical things can create tension in a couple, that can create dynamics for an entire family. I mean, like it can get really loop-de-loo. But I'm there to encourage and listen compassionately and encourage that freedom and that breath of fresh air for people. And I have written 3 books. So I know there's Let Go Courageously and Live with Love, Transform Your Life with Feng Shui. I love this. It's stories with gentle suggestions at the end. So for people who really, really know that their thing is to let go. Wow. And it takes courage. It really does. We can get so grippy with things, grippy with experiences. Oh, I only want the good. And when we make fists, we leave nail marks. We can, if we're gripping so tightly, we leave nail marks in our hands. Then there's the gift book of Cherish Your World gift book, 100 tips to enhance your home and life. And I'll read one really quick here. Speak from your heart. Oh, so perfect. When people live and speak from their hearts, it transforms their relationships and the quality of their lives. When people ask us to point to ourselves, none of us point to our foreheads, we point to our hearts. That's who we are. You can live from your heart, acting and thinking in ways that align with who you are at the deepest level. And in addition to kind of emotional life quality, life tips, there are also ones like release gently used furniture. So they're practical tips in this book. And then, of course, Live Inspired, which is this book is about self-discovery. Yes, it includes Feng Shui, but it's not direct. It's really, really stories about discovering who we are so we can live from our passion, even when it's hard. That we can love and grieve and get up the next day and do the next love-inspired action. I'm really, really proud of this book. This launched April 27th, 2020, a soft launch on March 30th. I had no idea a pandemic would hit at the same time that this book would launch, but I believe it really could help people and give them some hope and inspiration. Literally, I've lived through hard things, and I share about that, but I share the wisdom. I have reflections and wishes for the reader. So for instance, I'll read one of the wishes for the reader from this. So this one is the practice of patience. That's the chapter. Oh, who couldn't use some
Please.
Right? May you find the flow among action, introspection, and deliberate application in your learning process. May you allow others to learn new skills in their time and their way. May you discover patience as a refreshing practice, a way to live your life. Some things, Jen, just have to percolate. They just do. That's something that I've learned. I'm thinking, what else would I want to share about Cherish Your World? So Cherish Your World to me is about, again, it's about cherishing this, your body, your mind, your heart, your soul, your spirit, your purpose, your vision, your passion, what you love. It's like Mary Oliver talks about, let the soft body of your animal love what it loves, from the poem Wild Geese. Oh, I just love that line. And so often we think we got to suffer, and maybe we just don't. Or if the suffering comes, okay, and flow it through and grieve and maybe be a little crunchy, but then, keep that heart open. Just keep it flowing through. Just keep it flowing through. Wow. Oh yeah. So this heart, body, mind, soul, physical space, and your life. So I'm about holistic transformation, healing and transformation, and start where you can start, right? And my whole life is unrecognizable. It makes me tear up. My life right now is unrecognizable because of all the different small and large actions I've taken in all those containers, with relationships, with my thoughts, with my emotional blah, with my body, with my physical belongings, with the activities. Boy, did I get rid of the distractions. Oh my gosh, I let go, and I let go some more. And so much of my own journey has really been about letting go. And then seeing what's there in the empty spaces that I can fill up with love and heart and joy and contribution. So it honestly is such an honor to be in this conversation with you. I love who I am. I love what I bring to the world, and it's been quite a journey to get to this place and space. So I live in the gorgeous mountains of North Carolina, with the healthiest and most self-aware love relationship I've ever had in my life. And I'm vibrantly alive, and every day is a precious gift. So I think I hit the highlights. I don't know. If you have questions, ask me.
Because I usually don't talk almost at all, or I try to talk very little about myself, but we went on a minimalism journey over 5 years ago. And this, so I want you to relate this. I think this is a good example. Same week, because I felt good about the house and what we owned, except I also dreaded driving home from my corporate job at the time, because I knew there'd be a tornado waiting and I'd have to clean up the house and figure it out. So that was happening, which is, I think a lot of times people are saying two things that are very conflicting, but believing them both. And I believed I liked my house and my belongings. And I also believed that it was a nightmare to get home and have to put everything back together. I had a friend come over and she walked in, and I was so happy that she came over, and she said, wow, you just have a lot of stuff. And I could tell she was uncomfortable in my house. And it wasn't like hoarders or anything like that, but it made my heart sad that someone on the outside looked at this and she saw the chaos side of me that I felt. And my husband said to me, all like in the same week, sometimes I don't know how to help clean the house with you, because we both work, so we both split chores. And he's like, I'm overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed. And I was like, that's it. We're gonna, in my mind, I was going to donate and organize, which is where people start, right?
Right. Right.
But sometimes it's forced. And sometimes, I mean, in your situation, you were like, well, since we're getting rid of everything, let's
keep it going. So true.
Minimalists now for over 5 years, like I said. And what I did not expect, and I want people to know this because you have said it, so I want to reiterate this, is that it affected what was in my email. It affected what came in my mail. It affected who my friends were, what showed up on my social media feed. It spilled over into areas. It was like, yeah, I got rid of physical stuff and donated it and kept what brought us joy and made us happy that we used and loved, right? You whittle it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was so much bigger than that. And when people start this journey of minimalism, where you just want to feel good in the living room today, like, let's just do the living room. That's where I started, because it was the room that needed the least amount of work. So let's just start here and get it to where when we walk in, we're like, oh, I feel so good to be in this room. I started with one of the easiest. And then I did closets, because you can shut them. If you're not done, you can shut them.
Right.
You can get back to it later, because it's a process. And I had no idea, and it wouldn't have even made sense if you had said it to me. Like, this is going to change your life internally. This is going to change your inbox.
Right.
Talking about it's going to change my email subscriptions. Oh my gosh, I'm like the unsubscribe queen now, because you realize you just have no tolerance for those things that don't bring you joy and satisfaction and feed you in some way. So I am so excited that that's what you do. I saw Feng Shui and I was like, oh cool, she'll show me how to put my background.
Right.
Different than like minimizing and streamlining. It's so much bigger.
Right. Right.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is.
People who are considering this journey of they're stressed in their house and they realize it's stuff or something hanging on the wall that they didn't like. The interesting thing is you'll realize what you have that you absolutely love too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so fantastic. So
Yes.
How wonderful.
Yes. Thank you. I love that story. I love that story so much. Well, and I applaud you. Yay. Well, that it, like so many things, sometimes it takes that first step of your living room, and then all of a sudden that deeper awareness of, wow, there's something in the inbox, in the inner world that's starting to shift for my life. And what a liberation. It's such profound, deep work. Oh my gosh. It's exciting for those who are receptive and ready. It's especially exciting, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and to have compassion for ourselves. It's okay. Not supposed to get there tomorrow. Practice is big.
took 3 months, and then we found out we were going to move, and we had 2 months to move. And I was so thankful we had 3 months, because we got so much done in that 3 months. And I decided, I mean, we looked at each other. I'm like, I'm not moving anything I don't want.
Right.
I'm not packing it in a box and unpacking ever again something that I don't want. And that was a shift that got us like the fire lit. If you think about it that way, like you're carrying this stuff with you. And that's the emotional baggage, the carrying it with you.
Yeah.
And you do have to be kind. There was a point when we were ready to get rid of something, and I was standing, it was mine, something of mine that was personal. And I started to cry. And Dane said, why are you crying? And I said, I hang on to this for this reason, that maybe my kids will use it someday, but it's hard for me to let go of, because it represents my feelings of failure, because it was my wedding dress. Wow. Right? Wow. And he was like, then just set it to the side and leave it there for a week or two. It's not, you don't need to ever get rid of it. But I'm like, oh no, it's going today. But you start to realize, like, why am I carrying this archived wedding dress from a marriage that failed? Oh, maybe one of my daughters will want to use something out of it. And like, no, I kept it. It was like a punishment to myself of a representation of how I had failed. Yeah. And that's the stuff that people are like, what? I would have told you were out of your mind if you had said you're hanging on to that because of this reason. No. Literally unpack your baggage. Now you help people unpack their baggage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's an honor and a privilege as they process through. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
because the emotional work, it's so profound. It's the person sitting there with, broken up with the boyfriend, and yet, looking to opening the box and, okay, what here gets to stay because it really connects with my heart, and what gets to leave because it represents the failed relationship, right? Or that he really, really doesn't love me, or whatever, right? Or that he betrayed me, or blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's amazing. Well, and I would also add that on my journey anyway, I had to let go of things that I actually loved. And that's kind of this area that isn't always talked about. And yet it's important that I touch on that, because if you're really committed, there are these, corner moments that, oh gosh, moving and it's just not going to go on the truck. Or you go from a 3,000 square foot home to that, after the marriage ends, to that, 1,100 or 900 square foot home that's you and your dog. And you went from a family of 4 and 2 dogs, and now it's you and a dog, making a grocery list for one. Yeah. And you have to let go. You just have, because there's no place to put this beloved whatever. Picture, flower pot. You name it, right? Maybe even some dishes. Clothing, whatever. And that again is some really, really brave work. So there's like the letting. So yeah. So I meant it when I said a lot of my life has been about letting go. Woo. Yeah, two entire families that, one that I walked away from, and then one that walked away from me. Even though the marriage ended, I hadn't anticipated, because there were kids involved. But that was their choice, and okay, and I had to grieve that, and let go of the belongings associated with all of that, because it was just too hard. It was just too hard to have something go forward in my life from people who basically rejected me. Said, what, yep, you're out of the family. So yeah, very intense. It can be. But it's like I found myself, and look where I live now, and oh my gosh, the kind of the freedom I have and the life I have. So not to like leave people like,
oh. Totally worth it. But I think that you have when you go through this type of work physically, and then you realize it's very emotional, you have moments of resistance. For me, it was cyclical. Like, it was good, it was good, it was good, it was not good.
Yeah. Yep.
Then you have to pause and go, wait, okay, so what's happening in this situation that's giving me such resistance? And sometimes you know, and sometimes you don't know. But I think that those moments of resistance, when you know to expect them and they come, you can just slowly, kindly work through them. But the first couple, I wasn't slow and kind about it. I was, sledgehammer like.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, in my mind, if this started as a flood in your basement where you lose all this, that's kind of like the sledgehammer that gets things going.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is like just 2 months before that, it was so funny to like be in the place I am now and like track it back and track it back and track it back.
Yeah.
On New Year's Day of that exact same year, Jen, I was, well, on New Year's Eve, I was reading this book, Neil Donald Walsh, Conversations with God. Anyway, he was talking about unconditional love. And I had this epiphany about these gifts that I had received from my parents. And at that juncture, my mom would walk into the house and scream at me, rage about the things. Like I didn't know the use and care guide. Like they didn't come with use and care guide. Like if they weren't out where she thought they needed to be placed, if I wasn't using them, or, like where were they? Or, God forbid I let them go. And all of a sudden it hit me, oh my God, every one of those gifts were not given unconditionally. They came with a noose around my neck. And when I had that awakening, the very next morning, I went through the house like a a tornado, gathering up every single item I could think of that had been gifted to me from my parents. And I loaded it up in the minivan, and I wrote this beautiful gratitude letter. Thank you so much for all of these belongings. I no longer need them. I realized they were not given unconditionally, and I thank you for, the generosity. Happy New Year. Love, Laura. And I literally pulled up the driveway, started unloading all these things, and my mom thought I was leaving. Well, I did later, but she thought at that juncture that I was leaving my marriage and coming to move in with them. I was like, yeah, like that's going to happen. And my dad was kind of confused, but then he saw that I was not going to stop, unloading things out of the van and walking them up to the porch. And so then he started helping me, and then I gave him both hugs, and I drove away. And it was a first step in what ultimately I pieced out from my entire family of origin, when I realized the dynamics weren't ever gonna alter. And it was such a liberation. Like I never had to live with the belonging that somebody else was gonna walk into my house and rage at me for that thing because I wasn't doing whatever they expected or thought I should be doing with that thing. And that preceded the flood. I lived such a crazy experience of being asked, what is it that you would like, Laura? And I would say, oh, blah, 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 whatever. I don't know, ice skates. Oh, you don't want that. You actually want this. I don't know. I'm just using, and I would be like, well, no, why do you ask? I mean, the twisted, the mental, it was so crazy, and yet then I was told I was ungrateful, I was selfish, I was a worthless piece of shit. These are the kinds of things that were said to me over and over and over again, and it was like this shape shifting. I was split all bad. And so I became like this target of not just my mom, but there were other adults, and other hard stuff that happened. But I somehow along that, in that world of this shape shifting, I learned to kind of detach from belongings on some level and like stop asking or even knowing what I wanted. And it's no accident then that a couple of months later I walk in and these were now hand-me-downs, not gifts, right? And they were all hand-me-downs that had nothing to do with my tastes and preferences. Like, who was I? It just, you disappear. Yeah, I disappeared. I became invisible to myself. Now, I loved parenting at the time. I was a full-time mom. I loved what I did. But all the things that I had done up to that juncture, and I'm proud of my PhD. I'm proud of teaching at my college that I graduated from, and going back and kind of paying it forward or paying it backwards, or whatever the expression is. And yet all of that was to prove to somebody else that, to meet somebody else's ever-changing expectations, because I was never enough. I mean, I'm standing, getting my master's degree and being shamed because it wasn't the PhD, that I had stopped to end the first marriage and get my personal life, which was always kind of like in shambles, kind of back on track. And then I did end up returning and completing the degree, the PhD, but there I was being, cruelly shamed in front of my advisor, who I deeply respected, and I ran in the bathroom and wept. I mean, it was just so tough, right, to have those kinds of experiences. But yeah, I learned, just not, to, like the twisted world that it was. So belongings took on different meaning. Mm-hmm. And when I cleared and purged, it took me a long time to discern what I actually loved, and then what I loved about myself, and to find my own value, deep inside my heart, like inside, so that no matter what anybody outside of me ever said again, it wouldn't touch that part of me. And it took years. I mean, now that I'm in North Carolina, like these last 2 years, it'll be 2 years in June, have been the safest I've ever felt in my whole life. Like, no toxic people or difficult, challenging, tortured souls coming and, and I had to clean up my own self, right? Because I started engaging in some of those, because there was just so much trauma, and where was it gonna go, right? And if you don't know, kind of like I was able to identify, I could describe it intellectually, but I wasn't able to interrupt the trigger, my body, and my kids were little at the time, so I went to work on that.
Let's go back in time. Let's get
yeah, absolutely,
to tie it all together. And I know I'm gonna have questions.
Yeah, oh please.
God, because we already know there were issues with mom and dad and stuff. So let's dive into that. Where kind of this started.
Well, for me, I would claim that it started at birth, basically. So I learned the story later, but I have a bald spot on the top of my head, and I was in the crib, and as my mom told the story, she told it so dispassionately. I rolled as a 6-month-old baby into the path of a hot steam humidifier because I had a cold. And my sister just kept telling my mom, she's crying, Lori's crying. That's what was my nickname. I was a little infant. And Lori's crying. Like, oh no, just let her cry it out, whatever, it's no big deal. Well, finally they found me, and I had a bandage, I guess, but I was crawling around. She would laugh and say, gosh, we needed to put a helmet on you. And, and it took me a while to recognize that she was actually blaming an infant for rolling in the pathway of the hot steam. Like, what? So I would say that the difficult started pretty much out of the womb. Yeah, and my dad did his best to love me. He and his mom were lifelines in my life. But yeah, so it was always scary. She was very unpredictable. There was no alcohol ever. So it was the shape shifting, and know that she was known in the community. She was beloved. She was a beloved teacher. I would go to the fair and the little children would run up to her and be like, oh, you know, Mrs. Staley, Mrs. Staley. And they'd give her this big hug and she'd hug them. And I'd be watching this going, holy hell. Right. And so it was crazy, right? Because it was like, it had to be me. It had to be me. It just had to be me that brought out this horrible person who would be so cruel and say awful things. So there was the annihilating rage, and then there was the rat-a-tat-tat. But then there were these other adults. The first piano teacher I had, you know, took out the ruler and whacked the palms of my hand, you know, and then I go back and my mom would scream at me about, you're never going to play like your sister, and, you know, curl your fingers and practice. And, you know, and she would attack me with all these berating words, and I'd be sitting there like, really, you know, I'd burst into tears. It was like impossible to learn how to play the piano when you're being verbally berated and demeaned. Yeah, so those early memories were rough. I didn't feel safe at church. I didn't feel safe at school. There were children bullies. Paddling was big back in the day, and it terrified me. All of it just terrified me. So I lived kind of terrified, traumatized, but I did find that I could, I was a student, like I was a really, really good student. And there was this part of me so wanting to be good, right? And to prove to her that I was a really sweet, good person. And if, oh God, if only today, and literally I'm 42 years old when I finally realized that there was nothing I could do to alter my mom's internal world and perception of me ever, ever, ever. It was an impossible situation. And of course it took all kinds of, you know, things to get me to that juncture where I was like, okay, peace out. And then the dynamics, because then my siblings would buy in. My brother was split all good, so he was treated like the angel child in the family. And then my sister would often mimic my mom. So it was just really, really hard, because she learned that's how to cope, right, in this crazy household. And yet outside the home, our family was perceived as just like, oh, this, you know, the Staleys, oh, what beautiful people. They're kind, they're compassionate, they care, they're involved, they're, you know, and my dad was an exceptional human being. And he did give a lot to the community, but behind closed doors. And that's what's so painful about this story, is behind closed doors, it was a nightmare for me, just a nightmare that nobody was willing to talk about, lift the veil on, or, you know, deal with. And yeah, so her, but I learned to pay attention. It was kind of like I had Navy SEAL like training in the shape-shifting, right? That little piece that I've read about, I mean, oh my God, I honor, you know, all service people and, you know, all of that. This means no disrespect, but as a child, I had to learn how to navigate a shape-shifting adult, and not just my mom, but was sexually abused at 3 years old by a stranger who threatened my life and my best friend. And then 9 by a family member. And then I lose my virginity to rape at 19 years old. So all these layered traumas, right? So I have the kind of the daily experience in the household, but then I go out in the world and I'm having these additional layered experiences. So to begin to unpack that is just like, so it's no, right? So it's no wonder that, and keep in mind that people who knew me, right? I was a good student, straight A's. I swam, I got trophies on the swim team. you know, middle class. My dad's a college professor, you know, like we appear to be like this like I had it all together, right? Like I have it all together and I'm charging forward, and now I'm going to be in graduate school and I'm earning a PhD. I'm still proving. I wanted to earn the right to exist. I felt like I had to earn my right to exist, not just because some part of me knew that I wasn't, excuse me, but you said it was okay to cuss, fucking ever gonna belong. Like I was fucking never gonna belong.
Well,
Can I just, right? Can I just, is it okay if I exist and breathe the air and take up space, right? In this crazy world, right? Because it often felt like I would show up and it would be like, oh my God, you're here again, and rah, you know, and it was like, you know, and I've realized that that kind of reaction is like the person in that trauma state or whatever, they actually feel threatened for their lives, you know, but here I am, this little kid or this, you know, graduate of, you know, with a PhD, you know, and it didn't matter, you know, it didn't matter how perfect I was, you know, and I worked at being so perfect. Like if I say it this way, if I speak just so eloquently, if I speak from my heart, she'll hear me. If I wear the right clothes, she'll hear me, she'll see me, she'll accept me, she'll love me. And who doesn't want to be loved and accepted by their own mom, let alone, you know, other people, right? And I know that is a place deep inside of me that, you know, I get to take all those young ones, you know, and just hold them on my lap and go, I love you. I love you. God loves you. Universe loves you. Big love loves you. Whatever we want to call that, big spirit loves you. And that deep, quiet one inside that I've gained from meditation loves you. Yeah. So in graduate school, I wanted to kill myself. And I knew I wouldn't, but I started having images of, you know, gun held to my head. And that's when I began talk therapy. But, you know, what's amazing is the stories of the encounters with my mom especially, but that they were just a team, you know, and my dad was just a complicit. He loved my mom. They really did love each other. And he was just kind of a silent partner, if that makes sense to you. And I know he threw me under the bus in my 20s. Any rate, but they would show up. They still couldn't maintain the boundaries. Even when I was like, peace out, they still showed up. They kept showing up. They kept showing up. My daughter screaming in my arms, and I had said, please call before you come. It may not be a good time. It's my first child. I'm terrified, right? I'm like a mom, and I knew I needed to change patterns, but they show up. I said, I'm sorry, it's not a good time. She's screaming in my arms. And then my mom starts screaming at me. And I just closed the door and chose my wailing infant daughter. And I think for a while I chose my kids. I didn't want them to see me abused. I didn't want them to be abused, right? And then eventually I chose myself.
I think that's very common.
Yeah, where you choose your kids. I chose my kids, and I knew I had deep work. I had deep work to do to break the ancestral, these patterns. And I had a lot of love because I dreamed as a little girl of being a mom. I mean, it was such a passion for me. I was blessed to be a full-time mom for a number of years before I created, you know, Cherish Your World and took it on as a part-time business, very part-time. And then, you know, when my life really imploded again, you know, just a few years ago when the marriage ended after 22 years, then I went full out. I mean, now that's a whole other like, blah, 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 blah. There's been so many. Oh my God. I have friends who are like, oh my God, Laura, you can put sentences together. How do you do that? You've lived through so much. But I can, and know that I'm, you know, like I'm really blessed and I'm grateful. And my mom has passed, my dad has passed. She passed 6 days before Live Inspired launched, which I thought, wow, isn't that divine choreography?
You grew up without any place being safe.
Nature, being out in nature. Yeah. And friends' homes. That was it. But that was when I was older. And even then it was dicey. Like I always had to get permission, of course.
Of course.
And swimming, swimming in the swimming pool, right? And then there would be these summers that my mother drove all the way to Columbus, another community, 30, 40 miles away. And wow, I mean, I knew to be responsible and do all the chores and clean everything and, clean the bathtubs and, before she got home. But there was a little bit of breathing room in the summertime, and my brother and I would get on our bikes and bike to the swimming pool where my family had gotten a membership. And this is where, my dad, the biking, the swimming, he was a triathlete, an extraordinary triathlete. He actually competed in the Ironman twice in his 60s. He finished the second time. He was like a mile or two away the first time he did it. But yeah, the safe places were the swimming pool, nature, just being outside and at my friends' houses, but nowhere else was safe. I did not experience safety in any of those other containers. Yeah.
Now you went to get your degree, and at some point in here you got married and started having kids. I want to talk a little bit more. I understand the desire to check out, which is a lot of what suicide is, but the kind of knowing that you probably wouldn't follow through with it. But that started you on your initial talk therapy. Can we jump into kind of that space?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the inner bully, that's what I've called it, got so loud, and I couldn't hold it together any longer. And I know it was so, I mean, I was shaking when I showed up for that first therapy appointment, because I was breaking the code, right? What happens in this house stays in this house, and the whole pretense, right? Because we were, the family, whatever, perceived on the outside world. And here I was going to go to this stranger and start unpacking some of these challenges. But it was so affirming, because what I started to distinguish, and I'm so academic, right? Grace of God, there are these aspects of who I am that have absolutely served me and helped me stay alive and thrive. But books, I loved books. I jumped right in, the self-help, all that. And he started saying, look, this is a really challenging situation. And a lot of what's going on in between your ears is what's been said to you. It's known as an interject. It's the things that have been said to you that now you're playing internally on that tape, the loop tape, and none of it's true. None of it's true. You're not a worthless piece of shit. You're not this, you're not that, you're not incompetent, you're not irresponsible, you're not an ungrateful shithead, and so I began unpacking on an intellectual level, but it wasn't until I had kids, Jen, that I realized that I could only go so far with this, right? And I got into transformational trainings, which were really helpful. What are you pretending? What's the cost? What's the benefit? What do you get out of pretending this or that and the other thing? And then that's when I identified, oh my God, I have this rage. And I behaved so badly in front of these two little kids. Now, I wasn't calling them names, but I would literally flip out. I'd be just like, ah! And I finally, like my then husband at the time was like, you're terrifying the kids and you're kind of scaring me. And I was like, what? They need to, and I was like defensive, and they need to see what rage looks like or anger looks like and blah, blah, blah. But then again, I was reading and I was like starting to connect dots. And then I tracked myself in one of these episodes, and the veil lifted, and I saw the terrified faces of these two sweet little kids frozen in front of in front of me, and the shame just washed over me, and I ran into the bedroom and wept and wept and wept. And the very next day, I called a body therapist who understood, trauma. There was both the somatic trauma resolution and craniosacral. And because the traumas were lodged in my body, in the nervous system. And I wasn't going to affirm my way out of all those internal triggers. And in that work, I began to be able to clip the wire. Like I would feel the sensations in my body of what because I would get overstimulated. The little kids are a lot. And if anybody's a full-time mom out there, I'm like, oh. I mean, I'm in awe of moms and dads, like full-time parents, because I think it's the hardest job in the world. They don't come with manuals, right? And every child is so different, right? But they're not emotionally regulated, right? They're trying to figure themselves out, right? And here then I'm like this, acting like this crazy woman. And so I learned to start to track my body. I learned to spot the triggers. I learned to say to my kids, mommy's got to take a break. And I would go in the bedroom and I would scream into the pillows and into the bed and cuss, up a storm. And the F word was forbidden in my family's home. So I was like, and I didn't want to direct that kind of energy on my kids for one more moment. And it got to the place where I just could quietly set them down, because I would feel the twinge in my gut is where it would start for me. And then I would just say, guys, I'm going to go take a time out. I was putting myself in time out. And I would go in and meditate. That's when meditation started to be a practice for me, when my kids were really, really little. And I kind of dabbled in it. But know that the process for me has been long and rigorous, and sometimes felt like walking over a broken glass, honestly, because I had to own and look at, not relive, but look at every single thing that had happened to me that had created this, persistent traumatic stress, or PTSD, right? Well, for me, I would describe it as persistent because I felt stalked by my mom. I mean, I just did. And there were times that I intuitively would know, oh my God, she's coming over here today. And I would get in my car, and the kids would be at school, and I would just get in my car and drive, like I would go anywhere. And then sure enough, there would be this package, on the doorstep, that beautifully wrapped with crap inside, junk from their basement, with this weird note. I mean, it was so, oh God, Jen, really, it's so strange to say these things out loud, because it's like, who, but I do have, the good news is I do have people who believe me. And I had my kids as witnesses, because they were older when some of these things happened. My son's 13th birthday, and he's literally getting broken toys that my mom had put in a brand new bag. He's 13, broken toys from my childhood house basement. And then a picture of him when he was a baby, and a broken sun catcher, like cracked. What?
Right.
And of course, there's this part of me, right, that I had a moment, just like I did as a little girl, that I got excited because I saw the brand new helium balloons attached to the brand new beautiful bag, thinking, oh my God, okay, my mom effed with me, but she's not going to F with my kids. And then I was like, oh, that so wasn't true, because here we are.
How cruel.
So oh my God. So like it was intentionally cruel. I mean, like she was, she was crazy, but she was smart crazy, if that makes sense to you. There's things about this that I'll probably never understand. And I've read a lot. There's a lot out there about what my mom, was tortured by. Yeah.
You started getting body work done. You had done talk therapy. You're putting yourself in timeout. You're starting to unpack this a little bit at a time.
Right.
Let's go into the marriage ending and the launching of Cherish Your World.
Sure. Wow. Okay. So I've broken ties. I'm getting stronger and stronger and stronger inside. Doing all this body work. I now understand. I've pieced out with my family of origin. And then I see that the marriage just, whoa, no, it's a no-go. But so there was it was wild, the convergence again. So on the morning that my daughter is to be driven off for her starting freshman year of college, another implode comes. There's this discovery of things about her dad, and I was done. I had seen, and I knew, and I was getting stronger and stronger and more courageous and more courageous. And so I ended up driving my daughter to her first day of college. At the same time, it turns out that my son was struggling with addiction. And I didn't know if I needed a survival job. It just started this whole life implode of okay, now, and I asked him to leave the house, and I started thinking, okay, do I need a survival job? I started professional networking, and there was a moment that I would go to these networking events and, put on my professional clothes. And in the meantime, again, my personal life is just like, son is doing his thing, and, there's all the paperwork to be processing and court dates and blah, blah, blah. And there was a gentleman who looked at me, because I kept being so passionate, right? I would introduce myself and I'd be like, oh, Cherish Your World, blah, 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 and, this and that, and, this whole passion that I had discovered 10 years earlier. And then this gentleman who facilitated that particular group, one day I was trying to put together my LinkedIn file, and he looked at me and he goes, Laura, this is your passion. You need to be the founder of Cherish Your World. You need to do this. This is what is aligned with your heart and soul. And it's like that moment, right? That somebody sees you and feels the energy of your goodness and the potential and the gifts and that deep acceptance, right? And at that moment, I chose to go all in for Cherish Your World. And I asked him about a web designer, and had sold I think at that point I was close to selling the house or whatever, but, got some money, was able to put a down payment on the smaller house, that, 1,000 square foot house. But then I had some resources from the sale of the big family house, and was so blessed by that I got to go all in, heart, mind, body, soul. So that was like 2015 that I declared I'm all in for Cherish Your World. And then in 2016, this book came out, the stories I had been writing for a while. And then I think it was 2 years later, in 2018, this one came out. And then, of course, in 2020, Live Inspired. And the multidimensional healing and transformations have been extraordinary. Like who I become in the midst of all of those things, right? All those experiences. I've learned to deep listen. I've learned to have compassion for people. I've learned when people are behaving, adults are like crazy with their kids, I go, that's me. I'm not judging them. I've learned non-judgment. and to really, really hold space for people. And the privilege of living a life of greater peace from meditation, gratitude, running, cycling, continuing, tune-ups, right? For the any other things that need to fall away. And there's been a lot of uncoiling in the last 2 years of all this safety. It's really been an extraordinary experience. And I love Cherish Your World because I feel like that I'm become the change I want to see in the world, Jen. I've become the change I want to see in the world. Meaning, I have compassion. I have some wisdom, and I can listen and honor people's tastes and preferences because I know what it feels like to not have your tastes and preferences honored, to not have your own voice heard and seen and valued. So the deep commitment I am to hear, see, and value other people is huge. And it's not about our packaging. Like see people beyond the packaging. And I can do that. I can do that for myself. As the wrinkles and the grays come in, I don't care because it's about heart. It's about our hearts, Jen.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's about bringing that heart and keeping it open for other human beings and what they're navigating. Because you just don't know what another human being is navigating until you know. Until they're brave enough to tell you the truth.
Well, and you know what it's like to have to unpack all of that and attach that to your belongings and not only not be seen, but have no idea what your preferences are.
Yeah, right. Like, what do I love? I don't know. Do I like chocolate ice cream or vanilla? I don't, that, right? It's a mystery. Actually, I do know that one now. It's vanilla, but right.
Ice cream. So there you go.
Well, yeah. Actually, I haven't had ice cream in 3 years. Yeah.
But really, because you had to unpack all of that, and it was so attached to your physical belongings in a very dysfunctional way, and so much so that you didn't even realize this dysfunction of your own marriage.
Right.
But thankfully, you saw in yourself the things that you wanted to make changes on, and that was essentially the most important part.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. I had to come home to my own soul. I absolutely had to come home to this right here. That's all I could do. It was none of my business. Any whatever out here, whoever, whatever. I'm like, I'm not responsible for somebody else's words, actions. I'm just not their internal world, their happiness. Oh God, peace out, peace out, peace out, peace out. Only responsible for right here. That's it.
Laura, thank you so much for being on and for sharing. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the deep listening that you provided and the space that you held for me to go on to all those places. So thank you from my heart to yours. Really, thank you.
Thank you for joining today. It's been a pleasure. You can find me at momof18.com and on social media platforms as Mom of 18. A huge thank you to NGBN TV for sponsoring this podcast episode.